Welcome to Sex and Breakfast, the sexy way to start your day. Dishing out sexpert advice and spicy insights about sex, love, and everything in between. Hosted by sex coaches and therapists from around the globe.
Aloha, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Dominique, your sexologist and sex coach. Today, we're cooking up an essential yet often overlooked topic: sexual accessibility for differently abled bodies. Because everyone deserves access to pleasure, intimacy, and fulfilling sexual experiences, regardless of ability. Today, we're breaking down the myths, discussing modifications that make sex more accessible, and talking about resources that support disabled people in their sexual journeys and just people who need modifications in their sexual journeys. I'll be asking you, my wonderful listeners, and also my hosts, some thought-provoking questions, so get ready to engage. Let's dive in. Let's start by addressing a major issue: the deeply ingrained myths about disabled people and sexuality. There's this harmful narrative that people with disabilities aren't sexual beings or that they don't have sexual needs and desires. This couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the journal Sexuality and Disability suggests the lack of sexual assistance and resources available to disabled individuals comes from this very misconception, because society assumes disabled people don't or shouldn't have sex. The necessary tools, accommodations, and even public conversations about disabled sex are severely lacking, and that's a problem. I became especially interested in this topic when my husband's life shifted and he couldn't use his hips. He needed surgery, and it was major surgery because he had to replace something in his hips. And we'd been making slight changes because we couldn't have sex the same way. But when the surgery happened, everything changed. So we had to really think about what we were doing and use different tools. And also, in my training as a sexologist, Norlin helped me with the name. The name of the training I met you at, what was that called again?
The SAR.
Yeah, I forget every time for some reason. I don't know why. At SAR, we had a speaker who is a little person, and she also showed the different tools that can be used for people who need a shift in having sex. So I have a question for everyone, including you listeners. So how often do you hear conversations about sex and disability in mainstream media or even among friends? And if it's rare, why do you think so? Why do you think that is?
So, Dominique, I think this is a really valuable and important conversation. So, thank you for bringing this to the table. I didn't even hear about sex and disability until I was in school for sexology. So, and that was the first time I was in a SAR as well, with a speaker who is a little person, and she shared how sex education differs for little people, and even the type of sex toys and apparatuses they use to make sex more comfortable. I was also part of a conference in London, and that was for wheelchair users and people with spinal cord injuries. And it really opened up my eyes to how people assume that people with a physical disability are really stripped of their sexuality, and people just assume they can't or aren't still sexual beings at all. So I think there's so many people out there that it pertains to. So thank you again, Dominique. I'm so excited to have this out here, and also for people to share this with other people and get more education out there.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Yeah, it's a real thing, and it's not something that I also didn't really even think about until I was at the SAR. And then when I was in the process with my husband, I was like, this is a real thing. This is hard. Um, Dion or
Yeah,
uh,
no, thanks for bringing this up. And I think you're absolutely right because we took it for granted and we won't even think about it until something happened to us. And I guess the topic become even more real as our body is aging. So really a valuable topic to bring up. And also, like Nicole and like many of us, the first time I heard about this topic when I did my master at Sydney University, my first sexology school, and we had a special topic on this. And then subsequently, I encountered it at work in a public hospital in Singapore at a rehab and stroke ward. And most of the patients are elderly, but we also have a young stroke survivor, and people assume that they lead a sexless life. Also, in the hospital setting, with a lot of real priorities taking place, especially when people are undergoing medical rehab, sex is usually is the last concern on the list. So, so then a lot of people are playing this waiting game. You see, waiting for the healthcare professional to bring it up, or or yeah. So anyway, we decided to plug in this gap. We did a little webinar on sexuality after stroke as a way to help. So I can put it in the list as well. And also, I think what another interesting area of consideration while we are in this topic is how can we support the emergent sexuality of teens or young people with disabilities while still respecting their autonomy as well. So that's been a topic that sometimes colleagues ask me or express interest. But I think it's also to do with how the media uses and portrays sexuality, and usually, I mean, you can see it in all advertisement and things that we see daily and we consume daily in media. Sex is always seen as a privilege amongst certain able-bodied, usually young, white, um, of a certain body type and physique, right? So we unknowingly get brainwashed um, on this, and we don't really see a true representation in media of of a wide spectrum of sexuality. So yeah, that's my take on this.
thank you so much for sharing that, Dion. Yeah, it's so important. Yeah, for anyone who's been in a hospital and had major surgery or some kind of experience happen to them that shifted their lives in some way medically, um, it takes time to figure out what's next, right? So thank you for doing that. And I'm looking forward to listening to that webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, and back to your original question, like how often do I hear conversations about sex and disabilities? And though I'm a sex coach and I'm really plugged into lots of different channels, it's not often. I rarely see pleasure products that are marketed to help with mobility and reach. And that means if I'm somebody who's literally doing something related to sex and sexology every single day of my professional life and I'm not seeing it, then that means the general population is really not seeing it. And I was thinking back to that SAR, the sexual attitude reassessment, as well. And I thought immediately of the erotic film called, I think they just called it Disability. And it showed a group play party, a play space that was just many different people in the same room, all engaging in different forms of sensual play, sensation play, and other very erotic and sexual activities. And I, at that point, was pretty far into my studies. And I was just so moved and shocked and I just felt this wave of so many different emotions in the few minutes that we watched this excerpt. So I think it's media and ethically filmed sources of porn is a very powerful educational experience, and I would also go far to say as um, pleasurable, not just educational, but to bring in this varied expression of these also very consenting sex positive individuals that wanted to be in the film and wanted to be witnessed as well. And that's something we can think about as well.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that film until you were talking about it. Did they have that film? Excuse me. Did they have that film for you, Nicole, as well to see at the SAR or something like it?
I don't recall seeing that one. I've seen I actually saw a really great film that showcased a couple probably in their 80s having sex, and it was it was beautiful, and it was also like, wow, this is the first time I've seen aging sex. And you know, it's just not something that we often see. So I thought it was also really beautiful. So I guess you have to go to school to actually see something besides a heteronormative couple.
Right?
Or you
Right?
can
But
go.
maybe this changes after this conversation.
Right.
You can
Yeah,
do the
maybe.
SAR training on yourself, right? If you are interested, right? So that you can also increase your knowledge and change your attitude around this. It's
Yeah,
accessible.
Dr. Patty has a book about the SARS. It's on my bookshelf. I don't remember the name of it, but it's like it might be how to host your own SAR, but still. But yeah, it's still incredible. So hopefully things shift a little bit, right? Because it is important, and it just is not in our everyday awareness. So I wanted to share this quote with everyone. So I got this quote from, I think it was urge.com, which is a site for people with different abilities. And it says, Andrew, a disability rights advocate, puts it plainly. I think the mythology that disabled people can't have sex is rooted in ableist viewpoints and ableist ideas. We can have sex, but it's very clear that some people don't want to engage with us in any way, so they say we just can't have sex. And I feel that that could be part of the reason why people just aren't aware, just like everyday people, like who we were before we received any training or anything like that, before we even got into this industry. So that could be why. So what I wanted to share with everyone was, so I have this question: what can be done to make sex more accessible for differently abled bodies? And there are plenty of ways to adapt sexual experiences for different bodies. So I have just a few of them. So there's positioning and support tools like pillows and wedges and specialized furniture that can help with comfort and mobility. My husband and I used the pillows that helped with his surgery. And I wanted to touch upon something Dion said about the hospital experience, because the doctor who did the surgery, he had a circle, and there was everyone and their wives or partners there with them, so they could help them with the surgery. And I asked him, when can we have sex again? And he said, right away if you wanted to. And I was like, oh, okay. So I could tell you that it was so amazing to have the doctor who performed the surgery tell us that, because he knew what needed to happen, and even to have that access was incredible. So for us, the pillows were huge. There's adapted toys, and oh yeah, Nicole.
So if you didn't ask that question, do you think the doctor would have even told you that you could have sex, or was that something that you prompted from the doctor?
No, I prompted it from the doctor, and the wife was actually, one of the wives later was like, thank you so much for asking that question. I wanted to ask it myself. And there was a woman who had the same surgery, and she was like, thank you for asking that, because I want to know too. So yeah, he wouldn't. He had a group discussion, and this is in Belgium that we got the surgery done. He had a group discussion because he said he used to just go around to everyone's room and they would ask all the same questions. And I'd asked him if he'd heard that question before. He's like, "Oh yes, many times." And I was like, "Okay," So it made me feel better to know that it's not just me asking that question, and that everybody had the same question. So yeah. The other thing that helps, and this ties into what you said, Nicole, about the toys. So there's adaptive toys and technology. So there's sex toys designed specifically for people with mobility challenges, like hands-free vibrators, say that 5 times, or voice-activated devices. There's communications and consent. So understanding one's physical boundaries and needs is key. Open dialogue between partners is crucial to ensuring a pleasurable and comfortable experience. Like, for example, my husband and I had to over communicate when we had sex for the first time, just to make sure that he was comfortable. And even before he had the surgery, we had, again, over communicate. So it wasn't a sexy experience then, and it wasn't even when my husband and I first started having sex after the surgery. He just wanted to know he could. It's like, yeah, your dick still works, Yes. And then lastly is, and Norlin has touched upon this in a separate episode, sexual assistant services. So like surrogates. So in some countries, there's professionals who provide sexual assistance to disabled individuals, ensuring they have access to intimacy. But unfortunately, these are banned in some places or countries. So access. Oh, so go. And then I wanted to ask you ladies, like, what else do you know that would be supportive for people who have differently abled bodies?
I think it's also access to mainstream healthcare providers like
Right.
occupational therapists or even physiotherapists who are sexual health informed could be another alternative. I know there's in US there's also physical therapists, right? And this can be such a tremendous resource. Um, but the question is, do they have do these healthcare professionals, and most of healthcare professionals do want to help. The question is whether they have access to education and are they sexual health informed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, Dion was touching upon the question. So, if you or a loved one need a modification to make sex accessible, what would you want to see available? So, what barriers currently exist that stop disabled individuals from getting what they need?
I would love to see more widespread education. Having mainstream sex websites and companies like Love Honey and Pure Romance, which are kind of the top two right now, or one of in the top tiers. I would love them to have them showcase toys and other items for people with disabilities, which would allow this to be something that everyone sees and make it more normalized and really open up awareness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Nicole. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would love to see more play party spaces and events that are more welcoming and inclusive. I know me personally, um, I have some friends that are differently able that I've wanted to invite with me to several local events, and I realized, it's not made obvious on this event description. Not that I made any that I thought they would not be open, right? I know the people that runs these events and I feel their inclusivity, but sometimes it's not obvious. And so that when people are looking and trying to get into these kinds of groups and party spaces, for there to be more outward facing language, inclusivity, and also um, just maybe education around navigating consent when you're working with somebody playing with somebody who's differently abled. Because a lot of these parties have opening opening workshop components to drop everyone in the space and make sure everyone's speaking the same language in terms of consent. And while that is definitely important, I think we can expand it a little more and really speak directly to how to navigate and be very direct to advocate for yourself. So, and also just check in with your partner, going back to Dominique, the over communication you needed in that time. And but how do we bring this into the play spaces as well?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and that brings me to like the resources. If there are more resources, and like what everyone's touched upon about it, making it normalized and being seen. So there was Lovehoney, and what was the other one, Nicole, that you had said?
These aren't websites that actually do this now. These are just some of the top sex toy websites. Lovehoney and Pure Romance.
Pure
and
Romance.
So
that was the other one.
if these websites, which are like the top tier, aren't showcasing anything for people with disabilities, my guess is that like it needs to start somewhere, right? It needs to start with larger companies being able to showcase them so everyone can see and have awareness and make it more normalized. But yeah, they're not on there.
Yeah, definitely. And then there are, audience, there are a couple of resources I have for you, because there's organizations that are pushing for change. So there's the one I mentioned earlier, websites like Urge, urge.org, urge.org, and srhm.org, which means the Sexuality and Reproductive Health Matters.org website. And they provide education, materials, advocacy, and community support for people with disabilities who want to explore their sexuality, or people who are their partners who want to help them and support them. So they provide public discourse, because open and honest communication is what it's really all about. And then another fantastic resource is Sexuality and Disability. The book, Sexuality and Disability. I'm sorry, I don't have the author. But it will be there in the list, the show notes, folks. And they provide research and firsthand stories about navigating sexuality and disability. And then here's my question to everyone. So what can you do to support the sexual rights of disabled people? So I have some steps that if you're interested, if this raises your passion for wanting to help people, or maybe if your partner, you may already be experts on this, who knows? So you want to educate yourself and others, share resources, and challenge ableist assumptions about disabled sexuality. Advocate for better accessibility and sexual health spaces. This includes doctors' offices, therapy practices, and even sex shops. And then normalize conversations about disabled sexuality. So let's make it something that we talk about regularly, not just in a niche discussion like this one, folks. So we'd love to hear from you. So what did you learn today from today's episodes? Have you had experiences in navigating accessibility in your own sex life or with a partner? Please send us your thoughts. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment or review, and share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. So thank you, everyone, for today. And don't forget that pleasure is for everybody.
Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, send us some love by sharing, hitting subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us connect to more incredible people like you. If you want to learn more about sex coaching or therapy, you can find us at sexandbreakfastpodcast.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at sexandbreakfastpodcast. The people helping us cook this all up are Michael Merle, creating our tasty tunes, dishing out our audio and video is Max Rainier, and our delectable visual designs by Brie Vilaubi.